that you want to tell them about it, to watch it and give comment, it'll be there. So Hannah, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So again, I'm Hannah Risley-White. I'm the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission Deputy Director. And I happen to also have in my office with me today, fortunately, Rolf Schmidt-Peterson, who is our director. I will ask him to chime in as well if there's anything that I may be missing here. And I really want to thank the folks at the Corps. Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction, and your team for your role in this 50-year water planning effort. This is really a joint effort between the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission and a bunch of partners, including other state agencies, the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources, Indian Affairs Department, Water Resources Research Institute, who hopefully many of you participated in their conference last week, as well as Water Dialogue. And part of that is because the purpose of this plan, the 50-year water plan, is really to help New Mexico prepare for the impacts of climate change. And in many ways, this is distinct from other planning efforts that we've undertaken in the past. As you all know, we do regional water planning periodically, supporting folks across the state and developing regional plans. In addition, we have a state water plan that was last updated in 2018 and will be updated again in 2023. But this 50-year water plan is Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor's initiative to really help New Mexico plan specifically for the impacts of climate change. And we need to do that together. This is a problem that cannot be solved by any single entity. It's going to be an all hands on deck effort. And so that's why we've done a lot of public outreach through this, and also partnered with as much expertise as we can across the state. And so in terms of what this plan actually will look like, it is intended to be an executive summary level document. So this isn't a very, very long, expensive document. It's intended to be relatively short so that it can be something that decision makers, legislators, local officials, and others could pick up and quickly get a sense of what New Mexico is confronting related to climate change. And that's where the components of the plan, which are outlined on this slide, including an initial work done largely, and I'll talk about this more in a moment, through the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources, to evaluate what is the current science related to climate change impacts to water resources in New Mexico. So that's sort of the science foundation of this plan, and that's what the governor wanted, was for us to really have a strong basis in science. And then in addition, the plan will identify where we are resilient and where we're not. Where are we in New Mexico most vulnerable? And then provide recommendations for action. What is it that we need to do across the state and in our local communities to address the changes that are coming? And so that's the purpose of this plan, and we're excited that you all are here participating today to lend your input. And with that, Sarah, you could go to the next slide. And so as many of you know, and some of you participated, and if you did, thank you so much. We recently held a series of webinars related to resilience in 5 water use sectors that we outlined and are shown on this slide today. There are a couple of ways that you could look at resilience. One of them is through these sectors, and another is by having a specific look at the impacts associated with different climatic regions in the state. And so that's what Army Corps has helped us with in pulling all of the information together for this series of webinars this week. This morning we had one, and we'll have 2 additional ones on Friday, and Sarah will speak more to this. But what are the specific impacts to water in those different climatic regions? And that's what we're here to discuss today. I also just want to say there's the number of ways in which we're collecting input. There are several surveys that you can participate in, and Sarah will talk more about one associated with this series of webinars on the climatic regions later in the presentation today. We currently have posted on our website 5 resilience assessment surveys related to these 5 water use sectors, and we very much encourage all of you to participate in those. This is one of the key ways in which we're collecting input to be included in the 50-year plan. Next slide, Sarah. And just to place this in the time frame, we've had a relatively short timeline in terms of producing this 50-year water plan. We started, as I mentioned earlier, with the Science Foundation, and that's where we look to New Mexico Bureau of Geology Mineral Resources, they convened a panel of experts who all have decades of experience studying New Mexico's landscapes and water-related factors associated with those landscapes. And they pulled together what's called the Leap Ahead Report. That is also posted on our website. If you haven't looked at it yet, I very much encourage you to take a peek at it. We then transitioned into the discussion of resilience, which we're in today. And we're also in the process of transitioning into collecting input related to adaptation strategies and other recommendations that could be included in the 50-year water plan. And there'll be more discussion on that today as well. Next slide, Sarah. And I just wanted to highlight, some of the additional opportunities to participate in this 50-year water planning effort. As you know, there's the series of workshops this week. We are also working on organizing a state tribal water forum. There was an echo there for a moment. I'm not sure if that was on my end or what, but and I'd like to highlight that the folks at IAD, Indian Affairs Department, have organized a tribal water working group. Thank you to everyone here who may be participating in that as well. That's going to be a key place where we're looking for input into the 50-year water plan. There will be opportunities later this month and into December to chime in specifically on the recommendations section of the report. So please stay tuned to our website or sign up for our email list. The email to write to if you'd like to be added to the email list is in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. And I'll also paste some information into the chat about how to comment related to 50-year water plan or join the email list. And I'll try to do that a couple times in the webinar today. And then lastly, the sort of last big pulse of input for 50-year water plan will happen at the January annual meeting of the Water Dialogue. Very much encourage all of you to participate there as well, and information on how to register is on this slide. And as Sarah said, in case you've missed any of these webinars this week or previous webinars, there's a bunch of information on the Interstate Stream Commission website. There's a section called In Case You Missed It, where we will be posting all of these recordings. And so if you want to let other folks know or listen to it again, we certainly encourage you to do that. And then let me just see if Rolf has anything else to chime in here. Okay, I think we're good in terms of our piece. Sarah, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Hannah. And all the information that Hannah just mentioned can be found on their website, and I put that link in the chat. And then Hannah's going to work on a few other pieces of information that'll be found in the chat as well. So I know that there have been a lot of presentations covering this topic of climate change in New Mexico. In case this is anyone's first time joining a New Mexico 50-year water plan presentation, we're going to start with a brief overview of climate change in New Mexico. So the ISC has held many webinars, and this is a summary slide from those presentations that discuss the big overview of climate change across New Mexico. And this final bullet on the slide that says that different regions of New Mexico will experience different impacts, that's what we're here to discuss today. And we're going to discuss Climatic Region 2, the Northwestern High Desert. I do want to point out that we won't be covering everything on this slide. We're going to be covering the real unique things to the Northwestern High Desert, but everything that you see on the slide still applies to this region. So for the purposes of that leap ahead analysis that Hannah mentioned earlier and the New Mexico 50-year water plan, New Mexico is divided into 4 physiographic regions based on projected climate change and the associated effects on hydrology. These 4 regions are defined by a combination of latitude and topography, and you can see them here on the map. There's Region 1, the high mountains, Region 2, the Northwestern High Desert, which we're about to discuss, Region 3, the Rio Grande Valley Basin and Range, and Region 4, the Eastern Plains. And we'll discuss Region 3 and 4 on Friday of this week. These regions represent a simplification of the 8 climate divisions that are defined by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA. So when discussing when the authors of the Leap Ahead report were discussing the anticipated responses to climate change in the 8 smaller regions, the authors found themselves repeating a lot of the same information. And so to reduce this repetition, the regions were combined and simplified to the 4 regions that you see here. There's obviously microclimates in each of these regions that may have more or less extreme responses to climate change, but overall, they're going to trend in the same direction as the rest of the region. So let's start discussing this Northwestern High Desert, or Climatic Region 2. So the Northwestern High Desert, it includes the Colorado Plateau, San Juan Basin, adjacent mountain ranges, and this area has an average elevation of around 7,000 feet above sea level. It includes a few major cities and many tribal lands across the region. I also want to point out, this came up in the last webinar that we just gave, that just because our conversation here is ending at the New Mexico border, if you're concerned about areas like a mountain range just right across the border in Arizona or above in Colorado, the effects are going to be very similar in those areas as well, because Mother Nature doesn't stop at borders. So in New Mexico, the temperature increases have been even higher than what they have been in the rest of the Southwest. They've risen by more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit in the past 50 years. And on that same note, the freeze-free season, or the growing season, that's the time between the last frost in the spring and the first frost in the fall. It's approximately 2 weeks longer on average now than it was in the 1960s and 70s. I know a lot of people in agriculture or who have backyard gardens can attest to seeing a difference in their growing season now. I still have tomatoes ripening on the vine, and I'm here in Albuquerque. So, but if we look at future climate change models, we can see different emission scenarios, which is what's represented on this figure on the slide. And emission scenarios are possible pathways that society may take in the emission of greenhouse gases into the future. So when looking at temperature model projections in New Mexico, they indicate that the surface temperatures are going to warm substantially over the 21st century, no matter which emission scenario you're looking at. Overall, we can think about this as looking like the climate of Albuquerque at the end of the 21st century being similar to 20th century climate of El Paso, Texas. Both locations receive roughly the same amount of precipitation, but El Paso is considerably warmer. So you may want to think about what that means for ecosystems. You can compare the vegetation growing now in the Sandia Mountains near Albuquerque with what grows in the Franklin Mountains outside of El Paso. Now that stark difference is the temperature change for average across New Mexico. This region that we're discussing today, this high mountains, Northwestern High Desert region, it's projected to experience the highest temperature increases over the next 50 years. And it's going to be actually a degree higher than the average rest of the state. So that's a really big, important thing for this region. The temperatures are just going to be really extreme. So vegetation can be heavily impacted by increasing temperatures. Grasslands may become less productive and gradually be replaced by shrubs. Conifer forest drought stress will increase, particularly in the warmer and drier lower elevation areas of the region. And finally, trees along slopes or in bosque areas, any of those locations, they're going to be dealing with shallow and lowered aquifers due to the reduced water supply, just because of the temperature increase. And dieback of trees along riverbanks, that'll allow water temperatures to continue to increase and dissolved oxygen levels to decrease. And that can have cascading impacts to water quality as a whole. The image on the slide that you're looking at comes from the 2020 New Mexico Forest Action Plan. And I really recommend that document for anyone to read. It's got a wealth of good information and visuals like this map, and it shows ecosystem vulnerability. Ecosystem vulnerability classifications, they're derived from 5 climate variables and 3 climate models. and they're highly correlated with the existing vegetation patterns. So we can see region 2 highlighted with the black circle, and it shows quite a bit of ecosystem vulnerability to climate change. And very high vulnerability is the darker color, and low vulnerability is the lighter color. So for a climate as arid as New Mexico, there's two flows that strongly dominate the water budget. It's precipitation and evapotranspiration. We're going to discuss precipitation in some later slides, but here we're going to discuss evapotranspiration. The image on the slide is showing the average annual water budget for New Mexico. The numbers show the amount of water and are in millions of acre feet per year. So evapotranspiration has been divided into evaporation and transpiration. Temperature plays a big role in both of these cycles. As temperature increases, evaporation increases because there's a higher amount of energy available to convert the liquid water to water vapor. And transpiration increases because as with warmer temperatures, plants open up their stomata and they release more water vapor. So overall, with warming temperatures and a longer growing season, you're also going to have a further increase in evapotranspiration. So due to these increasing temperatures across the state, we know that evapotranspiration will increase across the state. And this map on the slide shows the change in potential evapotranspiration across New Mexico by mid-century compared to the late 20th century. So potential evapotranspiration, that's a measure of how much water would evaporate over a large area covered with uniform vegetation if there's unlimited water availability at the surface. So the estimate of changes in potential evapotranspiration driven by temperature and precipitation changes already discussed suggests that the average annual value of potential evapotranspiration will be 3 to 9 inches higher by mid-century relative to the late 20th century values. In this region, less available water will lead to a loss of vegetation cover. And remember that ecosystem vulnerability map. This can destabilize the weakly developed soils in the region. Destabilized soils will be more susceptible to wind and water erosion. Wind may reactivate dunes, which will impact local communities. There's many homes in this area that are on or near sand dunes, and reactivations of dunes would obviously have a negative effect on living conditions. Sheep and cattle are also important to the economy in this region, and much of the vegetation required for grazing in dune vegetation. If we have a die-off of that vegetation and the dunes are reactivated, again, that's detrimental to that livelihood. Another aspect of this reactivation of dunes or increased dust emissions is how it impacts snowpack. So there are some high mountain regions that are in this area, but also this area can get a lot of their water during snowmelt. And what we know about dust is that it's detrimental to snowpack because instead of snow being white and reflecting the sun, it can be covered in dust, making it a darker color and absorbing the sun's energy, which just accelerates snowmelt. Okay, let's discuss snowpack a little bit more because this is an issue worldwide and particularly in the Southwest where large river systems depend on snowpack and many communities do as well. So warming temperatures are expected to reduce the accumulation of snow during the winter and the availability of snow melt to sustain runoff during the warmer seasons. There is a consensus already that earlier onset of snowmelt driven stream flow is already being observed in our large river systems like the Rio Grande Basin, which is on here, pictured in the lower left. The green at the top is showing observed snowpack on April 1st. And the date April 1st has historically been representative of maximum snowpack. So looking at the figure, we can see that snowpack, shown at the top of the graph again in the green line, on April, it varies a lot from year to year. So that has to do with the variability is associated with precipitation fluctuations. But overall, you can see that snowpack on April 1st exhibits a long-term downward trend. since 1960. And snowpack monitoring all along the southern Colorado range down into New Mexico has all shown similar trends. Most locations have shown similar trends of reduced snowpack. The figure on the right is based on research from the Nature Conservancy, where we can see a prediction of change in the timing each year of when peak snowmelt runoff occurs. And this is at the Huck 2 watershed level. So the change in peak snowmelt timing of up to 3 weeks earlier is predicted across a large portion of the state, and that's the darkest pink shade. And region 2 is highlighted with a green circle, and you can see that the dark pink shade, which again designates that earlier snowmelt by 3 weeks, that covers all of this region. So rivers that depend on snowmelt and communities that depend on it, they're going to see peak snowmelt timing change and also a reduction. So we need to think about how this will impact irrigation, fish spawning, flood control, not only in this region, but also any region that depends on it down below, down river. So let's discuss precipitation. So despite recent drought years, New Mexico's historic precipitation trends are highly variable. Even when considering seasonality, there have been no significant historic trends in precipitation. So we all know that in New Mexico, precipitation is heavily influenced by natural fluctuations of the Pacific Ocean, like the El Nino cycle, and land surface heating during the summer. And we're all aware of the importance of the North American monsoon season and how it brings much needed rain to the region. However, we don't fully understand what drives the strength and the intensity of the North American monsoon. I do want to note that it has been documented around the world, though, that increases in atmospheric temperature have resulted in extreme rainfall increases. But again, how this affects the highly variable monsoon here in North America, that's not well understood. So if we look at model projections for precipitation on an annual statewide basis, we do not find a clear and significant trend in the future. However, if we look at the figures on this slide and we look at projections by seasonality, we can begin to see significant trends in future precipitation. And when looking at this figure, the darker green is increasing precipitation and the darker brown is decreasing precipitation. In winter frontal systems, which is shown at the top left quadrant, moving eastward off the Pacific Ocean, those winter frontal systems, they tend to track further north on average. So the southern part of the state exhibits a tendency towards less precipitation, while the northern region, which includes region 2, they tend to receive slightly more. It's important to note that even if there is more winter precipitation in the north, due to increasing temperatures, more precipitation will fall as rain than snow compared to historic precipitation events. The spring season, which is in the top right, it exhibits a general statewide drying trend. And for much of the state, spring is already the driest season of the year. So a trend toward less spring precipitation combined with hotter temperatures represents a clear trend toward aridity, which we've already discussed will be really detrimental for region 2. Summer precipitation shown in the lower left quadrant, it includes a trend towards stronger monsoon precipitation in the southwestern corner of the state, combined with a trend towards less precipitation in the northeast. So this latter feature, that's part of a more general geographical trend towards drier summers in central North America. So remember, we're not 100% sure about what will happen with extreme precipitation events in the North American monsoon region, but we do know that warmer weather worldwide has led to greater extreme precipitation events. Any large rain events in this region after the extreme heat and baking of soils during the dry springs, that will lead to increased erosion or incision in arroyos and could possibly reduce groundwater infiltration, which may in turn lower local groundwater tables, desiccate vegetation, drain wetlands. It's just a cascading effect. Now down at the bottom right, in autumn, precipitation average, it's generally small with some tendency for increasing. in the southwest New Mexico, but overall it's not a huge change in Region 2. So at this point, I want to ask, so what does this mean for the human connection with water in the northwestern high desert? We've covered a lot of information, and I've tried to cover it quickly so that we have a lot of time for discussion. And this is that time period where I want to use to come off mute and discuss, what does all this mean for that human connection with water in the northwestern high desert? If we have changes in the growing season, added stress on water needs, if there's reduced aquifer levels, we have to dig deeper wells. That can cost a lot of extra money. So yeah, I just want to take this time to invite people to come off mute, raise your hand, use the chat, and we'll discuss what this means for the human connection with water in the northwestern high desert. I will put up a summary slide that discusses what we just talked about. And it's not on this slide, but all of these factors are also increasing the chances of increased wildfires, which can have detrimental impacts on water quality and extra sedimentation into water. And you can also use this time to ask any questions about what was just presented. And also, please remember, if you're on your phone, that you may be double muted. So if you're trying to talk to us, don't forget to unmute on your phone as well.
This is Crystal with the Navajo Nation. I raised my hand, but I didn't know if you can call on people.
Oh, yes. I apologize, Crystal. I didn't see the hand go up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. For the Northwestern region, I know sometimes people think that precip in that area information is like a black hole because a good chunk of it is Navajo Nation. But more resources to add to the toolbox for that region is a paper that I put out regarding precipitation variability across the Navajo Nation, of which the eastern region of the Navajo Nation is represented in that paper. So you could just Google Navajo Nation precip variability and put my last name, Tule-Cordova, and that should pop up. And then you mentioned, a lot of unknowns associated with the North American monsoon. I also published a paper, and it's in preprint right now with WRR under AGU for that publication. So if you Googled my name again and then put stable isotopes and North American monsoon, it should pop up. So, more information, but to answer your question regarding, some of the what we're noticing on the land associated with drought and just precipitation changes in general. And what we're noticing, is a lot related to drought. I did a flyover of, the Arizona-New Mexico border, checking on our ephemeral perennial streams as well as our lakes. And, the state that they're in is not what I knew them to be over 20 years ago. And, that's definitely seen on the land as well with the increased dunes that you can notice along 491. So the impacts to humans there, but also thinking about the drought impacts, not only to, our farmers and ranchers, specifically looking at changes in the availability of water. The impoundments that we have for livestock are not as abundant as in years past, related to, the contributions that are lacking from precip to those areas. So we've noticed, reliance on the wells more, the groundwater wells, but also what we've noticed as well in some areas in the Navajo Nation are the increased impact on public water systems for the uses of, you know, providing water for those other purposes that I mentioned. And so that's provided challenges associated with that. What we've also noticed, there's some other research that has been done by Lonnie Sinogini at University of New Mexico, and her research looks at mountain block recharge on the Chisca, so the Chisca Mountains border the Arizona New Mexico border. And so that's really interesting information where there's quantification evaluation done. She's done some snow research in that area too. And so just looking at, you know, what that information is telling us, one, on the Navajo Nation in that northwestern region that we're talking about today, earlier snow melt runoff, what we used to see, you know, like in May is now happening a lot sooner. We've also noticed like changes in stream and that impact there associated with the hydrographs and how that looks. And then just precipitation in general in the area. The research that I mentioned, unfortunately, is not up to date to, you know, it was a few years back, but you know, the situation that we're in now with the drought is a lot more noticeable. But I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that information, Crystal. And I just wanted to point out that Dana and Mark looked like they had tried to find the links to what you had said. And it would be awesome if you could just double check that, because I think there's a lot of people on the call, especially from the ISC and here at the Corps. We're really interested in seeing that research. And I think that's a call out as well to the communities as a whole, that we need to get more information out there about this southwestern region, about the monsoon, about precipitation in the area. We need more research and information on it. So thank you for that. And we have some comments coming in. Thank you, Crystal, for adding that. So we have a question: how strategically and financially is New Mexico prepared to mitigate climate change? Hannah, I think that you may want to answer that one.
So, I mean, I think for Lori's question, thank you for that question, Lori. I think, you know, there certainly are challenges ahead, both from a hydrologic standpoint, but also from a funding the solutions that are needed standpoint. But I think that that's where we're really hopeful that this 50-year water plan will be a call to action and will be a report that can be a plan that can be looked at to leverage the appropriate resources. And then the task at hand for us will be to figure out how to prioritize appropriately those resources. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about, you know, how to tie funding to planning in the state so that we could collectively, you know, both at the regional level, and also at the state level, work together to figure out what are the issues that we're confronting. And that has to start with the kind of technical knowledge that Crystal was just bringing to the table in terms of what it is that we're trying to manage specifically. And then engage communities in building effective solutions, and then leveraging the appropriate resources to fund those solutions. So I think certainly there are challenges ahead, but I actually feel very optimistic and lucky to be able to be participating in this 50-year water planning effort, because I think it's very much needed. And there's been a lot of interest in it through our webinars and through our website. And so I encourage you all to chime in on that and help us figure out, you know, what comes out of 50-year water plan. What are the next steps once this plan is done early next year? And I don't know if others want to chime in on that question as well. I certainly would love to hear others' thoughts.
I would just also ask, like, from the agency standpoint, like, are there best practices across all the different agencies in which to deal with all of this information? Like, I just feel like it's really overwhelming, and it's a little bit like, oh my God, what are we really gonna do? And then just recognizing that a lot of the resources are tight. And so like if there is generating new resources, like where does that really come from? And I also just like wonder like how much like I know on some levels like all the different extractive industries feel like they've been taxed enough and they're doing their part. But I'm wondering as this becomes more dire, like how do they recognize that it's going to be more expensive for everyone? So like my family that lives out in the area, you know, purchasing water, you know, whether that's a case of water from Walmart or it's a large cistern of water or whatever that is, you know, it's expensive for the folks. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, how much of a, like, is this report going to be able to really flag or do that alert sort of thing to everyone to help us all collectively understand that it can't be business as usual, and like how much are we prepared to really forge a new mitigation strategies or whatever that is, right? And so I thank you though for the answer that you gave, but I just wanted to flag that for just my own personal concerns about some of this stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. And I think I would just say to that, even just through this planning process in the last few months, there's been a lot of sort of bridge building that's happened between agencies, including our work with you and the folks at IAD, but also other state agencies, and then also other entities and from in academia or NGOs and otherwise. And I think, you know, there's more of that needed so that we can understand each other better and also understand what are the resources out there and what's the right place to plug each of those in to address the challenges that we're facing. Because you're right, it is certainly daunting, but as I said a moment ago, it's also been sort of energizing to make all of these connections with folks across the state who are concerned and really being thoughtful about these challenges. So I think the 50-year water plan is really sort of like a first step, like a building block or a springboard onto additional effort that will come out of it. And I certainly hope that it will, you know, encourage that and provide the foundation for additional work.
Thank you.
I want to, Keith, I see your hand, but I first want to bring up Casey's comment. The Northwest New Mexico will be impacted in very detrimental ways due to the low income of many of the residents, both Indigenous people and Hispanic heritage. We have a lack of viable communities, with most residents already traveling 100+ miles for work and supplies, including food. I'm wondering if it would lead to an exodus of residents as they're pushed further from the lands with the future climate change concerns. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to address that question.
I mean, I guess I would just say, I think, you know, one of the things that's challenging in this process is that there's a fair amount of uncertainty in terms of what our future will look like. But certainly those concerns expressed are valid, and there could be, you know, some dramatic changes to our landscape that may result in something like what's described there. And so that's where, how do we prepare for that possibility and also do what we can now? I guess I would also say, you know, we've had some feedback, not much actually, but some saying, you know, 50 years is a long time away. Why are we worried about that? And clearly, as you all know, we're seeing these impacts already and have been for a number of years. So this is very much real and very, very present, and time for us. I feel the same urgency that Lori was mentioning earlier, for us to work on it now, to try to, you know, prevent some of these impacts and also prepare for how we're going to respond to them.
Thanks for that response. Keith, if you'd like to come off mute, you're welcome to. And I see you've had your hand up.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, just first off, My name is Keith Candelaire, and I work for High Water Mark, but I'm also a Pueblo tribal member. And I just wanted to express my concerns that I've seen over time working with various tribes. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of I guess I'll speak for this, the Pueblos, is that a lot of the Pueblos, a lot of the times, face hardships with funding needs. So for instance, Pueblos have a traditional and cultural tie to farming. And so a lot of the irrigation systems are dilapidated. We can't deliver water efficiently. So sometimes it takes a lot more water, to make a delivery to a farmer than it should because of the structures that are just falling apart. So, we're always looking for funding to be able to fix these structures. So I see that as one of the challenges. Another challenge that I kind of see quite often is you guys had mentioned it, is a domestic water supply. And I noticed that, quite a few of the Pueblos have their wells drilled in like alluvial aquifers. So, if you have less runoff, you're definitely going to affect that aquifer. And so a lot of the tribes don't have backup wells. So that's a big issue. And that's one of the things that I'm very concerned about, once we have this drawdown in groundwater levels. So, we're always looking for funding to drill wells that are in other locations from other aquifers that are hopefully, in water is in good condition. But as that takes a lot of funding to be able to do that and to be able to just pipe to, another storage facility as well. And the other thing I think, and I, sort of try to relay this information also to federal agencies, is that I think a lot of the tribes would benefit from technical assistance. Unfortunately, a lot of the tribes don't have the technical assistance they need, such as like hydrologists, geologists, engineers, people in those types of field to help out, and I think a lot of the Pueblos have really good projects that they'd like to pursue, but they just don't have the capacity to be able to perform the job. So I think that's also a great need for the tribes. Thank you.
I just want to thank Keith for your comments. I agree with everything that you just said very much. And it's funny because I was talking earlier with folks here today about this real need for, whether it's at the state or elsewhere, a team of experts that could be deployed to different communities to help support them in identifying existing data, collecting additional data, and doing hydrologic modeling, and getting sort of the technical foundation to support decision making that's necessary in local communities. And to do the kind of preparation we're talking about, whether that's laying the groundwork for shortage sharing agreements or diversifying supply or otherwise. So yeah, Keith, thank you so much for that.
Sir,
So
we had it was a good segue to a couple comments there from Chile and David Gallegos are talking about groundwater and the competing uses for oil and gas activity. The 50-year water plan does not quantify the amount of water that may or may not be going into an aquifer, but what we know is if there's less surface water, which is just demonstrated by the warming atmosphere, there'll be less water available to recharge those aquifers. And so every water source will have more demands on it. And of course, those competing uses are going to drive some of those conflict in that area. I don't think the 50-year water plan is necessarily putting one use, prioritizing one use over other, but it's starting that conversation on, how is this going to be resolved? How are these conflicts going to be, approached in the future?
So I do see some hands up, and I want to get to those and some more comments. But in case anyone needs to jump off the call at 3 o'clock, I want to be cognizant of that time and just really quick let everyone know that the big question that we want answered in the conversation that we really want to hear from everyone includes this question of how can the Northwest High Desert increase their water resilience? And you can help answer that question and also continue the dialogue through this New Mexico Climatic Regions survey. It's really short survey. All that's required is your zip code. There's only 8 questions, but the main question is down here, and that is really elaborating on water saving and water resilience projects that you're already a part of. You know, the Interstate Stream Commission, they can work in a room to write this document, but that's just a few people. And if we can spread this out and get ideas from across the state and across the regions, then it's just going to be even better and better resource sharing. I've put the link to that survey in the chat. And with that, I'll let us continue the discussion. So it's there in case anyone needs to jump off, you now have it. And I think that's Imnia. I apologize, I'm not saying that right. Last name's Sinha.
Amina.
Amin. Okay.
Amina. I'm the hydrologist on the Santa Fe National Forest. I'm a new hire. I've been in my position a month. And I appreciate today's discussion. And I'd love for us to, in this plan, be solution focused and make sure that we are being action oriented and into the planning of getting some work done, because it's time to restore our landscapes. We have rivers and streams that have head cuts that are actively lowering the groundwater table and sending water as fast as possible away. And so really just doing stream restoration that slows the water down, slows the resonance time that water is in an area, should be a major focus to be able to hold on to the amount of water that we do have when it's here in those alluvial aquifers that are so vulnerable, as being mentioned. The Forest Service is active doing forest restoration, but with the Forest and Watershed Restoration Acts recently being signed, there's also partners stepping up in every area, and they want to do work on the ground to restore forests and restore our soil condition so that our ecosystem services can give us these services like clean water and abundant food, that climate change is sending us on a certain trajectory, but we can get active right now and sort of reverse some of those trajectories, and we can actively restore our rivers. We can turn rivers that are going intermittent back to the perennial ecosystems they used to be by just slowing down our water and restoring these rivers the way that they deserve. So I'm actively engaged in trying to get our youth having a more active role in this restoration. And I would love to collaborate with any tribes in terms of some of the lead that's needed to get this good work done. But I also like to get those youth active on national forest land, thinning the forest and maybe putting that small woody debris and small diameter wood products into things like active beaver dam analogs or structures that hold the water a little longer in that spot. So I think that I'm excited that there's a lot of partners right now wanting to do that work. And it can include estate management and a lot of these things that are shared stewardship. So it's an exciting time to be in New Mexico. I know that these challenges are real, but if we can get focused on the actions together, I'm excited to do so.
Thank you for that. And if you want to put your contact information in the chat, so in case anyone wants to contact what we just talked about, especially with incorporating or encouraging youth to join you, please put your contact information in the chat and people can get it there. We also had another hand up, and I apologize, I lost it in the list, but I saw there was a hand up. So if you'd like to come off mute, please go ahead. I thought it was someone whose name started with an M, but now I've lost it in my list of people. They move around on me. Okay, not hearing anybody. Okay. Lori, someone's on the phone and is raising their hand to talk. Sorry, you messaged that to me privately.
His name is Patuch, and I think he's been raising his hand.
I'm trying to. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I am Patuch. I'm from Acoma Pueblo. And just, I suppose, some observations about the 50-year water plan that I think we all know the lack of water in this northwest region of New Mexico and all of the climate changes impacts that are going to occur. And I just wondered about New Mexico's, I suppose, proposal to try and conserve water, especially from the effects of huge mining operations, which tend to withdraw from underground millions of gallons of water. In some of the proposed uranium mines that have been proposed for Mount Taylor, they were projecting anywhere to 4 to 6 million gallons of water a day. And this is water that has collected millions of years, and with climate change, it's not going to be, it's irreplaceable. So I really think that not only, of course, mining operations, but fracking does the same thing, that we really need more input and conservation from the state of New Mexico. And citizens and other people really need to insist that New Mexico do much more in conserving water. Just my observations for now. Thank you.
I'd like to just say, just quick to that, thank you so much, Patuch, for your comment there. I think that's a really important one. You know, I think, and I mentioned this morning, many of the solutions that we've been hearing so far through our resilience assessment survey have to do with identifying additional supply. There's really only so far that will go in terms of what's available out there or how feasible that is. And so really a lot of it's going to come down to conservation. And probably, as you're implying here, sort of enforcement, right? And so
Right.
of existing water rights and their use, and defining some water rights, the key water rights in New Mexico, including some water rights pertaining to tribes, pueblos, and nations. So those are all the kinds of recommendations that we're really looking for to include in this plan, so that, you know, we hear from you, and then we'll reflect that back in the plan, or, you know, refer it to other state agencies, you know, for whom those comments are more relevant. But certainly, you know, these are the types of thoughts. Please contribute them through the Tribal Water Work Group or through our website.
Also, I just want to remind everyone that this meeting was recorded, and comments that are spoken and not put in the chat box, those will still be recorded, and we'll have a transcript of those. So we are going to be looking at all participation, all comments, all concerns as a part of the New Mexico 50-year water plan. So there is a question about cloud seeding. I know that you answered that in the last webinar we had, Hannah. Do you have info on this technology, and is it working?
Yeah, so cloud seeding has been seen to be successful in some areas. It's very dependent on conditions and topography. It's definitely something that can be a solution to pursue, but certainly is not the only one. So it can be, you know, one of many approaches to look to, but there is not a silver bullet to solve all of our problems, I guess, is what I would say.
And to Jackie, who I think this was just to me, but there was this comment about golf courses and using potable water. And I just want to point out that there is a recreation portion of the New Mexico 50-year water plan that you can go on and discuss anything about recreation in that survey, and it's on the website right now. Am I saying that right, Hannah? I think
Sure.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So,
put into the chat again a few minutes ago the link to our website, but it's been in there several times. So hopefully people can find it, and those resilience assessment surveys can be found even just through the hot topics button on the main page of the Office of the State Engineer's website.
so Robert commented, like as was said earlier, the Franklin Mountain climate will be moving north to Albuquerque. Should we be studying how New Mexico's rural high desert economies can move toward matching the current rural high desert economies that are now south of El Paso? I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that, Hannah, or.
I mean, I think, you know, similar to previous discussions today, I think we need to start, you know, thinking through, you know, how do we prepare for some of these changes, and that may be part of that for sure.
And that's also something that can be a, I know that what you're talking about, Robert, is routinely done in the ecosystem world, you know, studying ecosystems, how they move due to climate change. And, you know, I think it's a model that could be applied to economies and regions. I think it's a great idea. Trying to make sure. Patrick McCarthy has added some resources for the new Native American Zone Grant for water resilience, offers funding and technical support for water planning and projects. He's offered that in the chat. And I'm just trying to make sure I haven't missed anything. Bill Bright is suggesting inviting other high desert climate regions or countries like Israel, where they have desert climate farmers, to come and meet with people and share ideas. All right, and I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone that had their hand up or wanted to comment. We are a little past the hour. We've had a lot of good dialogue. So I'll just give it
last. Amina did post a link to the that water grant or the forest management grant and so forth, some information on the website for frequently asked questions and how to, what does the Watershed Restoration Act, Forest and Watershed Western Act entail, and how do you participate in that? Thank you, Amina.
I'm just going to give this a pause to make sure no one else wants to comment or add anything, make sure I haven't missed anybody. That's very true. Jason just added a comment that there's a need to create and fund watershed restoration offices to manage projects. Right now, many county, state, and tribal governments don't have the capacity. And again, I think that's the kind of ideas that we need in the New Mexico 50-year water plan to make sure we point out, bring up. All right. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today to talk about Region 2. I think we had some good dialogue, and I just want for everyone to know that you can continue adding to this dialogue, adding to the New Mexico 50-year water plan over the next several months. There's many opportunities to have your voices heard and your ideas included. And I think that it really will take a statewide effort from everyone. So with that, that's all I have. Hannah, do you want to say anything in closing?
No, I guess just to thank everyone for participating today. And I felt like there was a lot of really positive suggestions in the chat and through the comments. And we look forward to continuing to engage with you as we work on this 50-year water plan. So thanks so much. And thanks to the folks at the Corps for organizing today.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And Mark, if you can go ahead and end the recording.